when Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in order to attract investment into this country, told all of the people that he knew that come and set this country up. In return, we will give you the cheapest money available in the world for the easiest 10 years available in the world and at a return that suits your convenience. So this upper middle class of India that happened to be Muslim came here and became billionaires. We're talking about now, when I was in university in 2004, the cream who could afford it from Pakistan went abroad. The cream who weren't smart enough would go abroad from India. Correct. It wasn't about affording it.
Exactly.
Because the smartest ones went to India. When you ban the union, you basically decide that you need money to be a politician. Because the grassroots political leader stops being represented. So the only way you are represented is if you buy a constituency seat. India bomb phad deta hai. Sahi hai? They test their nuclear bomb. Clinton calls you and says, don't test your nuclear bomb. The world's strongest people are calling you saying, हमें पता है तुम बॉम्ब फाड़ सकते हो, हमें पता है तुम कर सकते हो, हम मान लेंगे कि तुम्हारे पास बॉम्ब है, हम तुम्हें $5 अरब देंगे, तुम्हारी सारी गलतियां माफ कर देंगे, तुम्हें अमीर कर देंगे.
मतलब you're getting a clean slate and $5 billion.
And you're getting to keep your bomb. They're not saying अपना bomb हमें दे दो. Do it. Let people elect who they want. Give them representative local government. Let them get tired of who they thought they wanted. Let them do it again. Let them do it again. And eventually the world has taught us that if you let people do this again and again to the point where you make elections boring, you get things, you get results.
Hello and welcome everyone to Digitales. My name is Faizan, founder and CEO of East River, and today I have a litigation lawyer and political analyst, only because we want to figure out what is going on in this country, especially after last week, especially after social media has been shut down, the internet's been shut down, there's been mayhem, there's been ruckus, and we needed an opinion, a view on what is going on. So my friend Moiz Jaferii is here today to talk about it. Moiz, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me. You have really nice digs.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank
really
you.
Nice.
This is just
well set up. Looks really professional.
I appreciate that. Not as professional as the commentary you do on TV.
Thank you very much.
Which I follow regularly, and your article in Dawn as well.
Thank you very much.
And so I figured you'd be the right person to bring on and ask what's going on. I mean, there's so much in the news, there's so much confusion. Articles हर जगह लिखे गए हैं, opinions हर तरह की चल रही हैं, and I wanted to just take a breather and stop and say, okay, wait a second, let's take a step back and figure out, we know where we are, we're in a crisis. How did we end up here, in your view?
यार उर्दू अंग्रेजी
जिस ज़बान में आप बोल रहे हैं.
मेरे ख्याल में Musharraf Zaidi has described this borrowing from an international concept as a poly crisis. वो भी एक मेरे ख्याल से वाटर्ड डाउन चीज़ है कि एक अलग से मईशत का क्राइसिस है, इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस है, उसके अलावा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल क्राइसिस है, उसके अलावा जो ये जुडिशरी वर्सेस पार्लियामेंट स्टैंड ऑफ हो रही है, उसके अलावा एक सिविल मिलिट्री इम्बैलेंस का क्राइसिस है, वो पुराना क्राइसिस है जो अब कमिंग टू अ हेड है, उसके अलावा एक सिक्योरिटी क्राइसिस है. तालिबान रिलेटेड जो सारी एक्सक्यूज़ेस इस्तेमाल हो रही हैं, वो एक्सक्यूज़ेस का बेसिस तो यही है कि देयर इज़ एन इंसर्जेंसी दैट माइट पॉप अप एनी मोमेंट ऑन एटलीस्ट योर कंट्रीज पेरिफेरीज. देयर इज़ अ सेपरेट बलोच इशू दैट इज़ अफेक्टिंग हाफ ऑफ योर कंट्री इन टर्म्स ऑफ लैंड मास. उन सब क्राइसिस के अलावा देयर इज़ अ क्राइसिस ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस इन ऑल इंस्टीट्यूशंस, देयर इज़ अ क्राइसिस ऑफ कॉम्पिटेंस इन ऑल इंस्टीट्यूशंस फॉर डिफरेंट रीजंस. तो वी आर in a certain kind of soup where we have been in before, but just one soup at a time. Right now we're just in.
This is a Halim.
This is a Sunday special where you throw in everything that was left over throughout the week, and no one really knows what's going to happen because all of this together hasn't happened yet. So people are saying शायद 1977 हो जाए, शायद 1992 हो जाए, शायद 1998 हो जाए, शायद, लेकिन हमें पता नहीं है क्या होगा. क्यों? क्योंकि ये सब कुछ मिल के कभी हमारे साथ हुआ नहीं है, और ये शायद एक अच्छी चीज़ है. शायद जिस इर्तिका की हमें ज़रूरत है, उस अमल की शुरुआत इस तरह ही हो सकती है. एवोल्यूशन मस्ट बिगिन विद दिस काइंड ऑफ क्रैश. आई फील दैट आपका डेमोक्रेटिक प्रोसेस लंगड़ा लूला जिस तरह का भी है, वो इस वक्त तक चल इसलिए रहा है इसलिए कि आकर क्या करेंगे जो आते हैं आमतौर पे. ना अमेरिका से दोस्ती है, ना कोई जंग छिड़ी हुई है जिसके अंदर हम किराए के सिपाही बन सकते हैं, ना कोई तेल मिल रहा है जिसके अंदर हम अपनी हुकूमत चला सकते हैं, ना कहीं जब कहीं किराए के नहीं बन सकते और जब कहीं अपने आप को किराए पे नहीं रख सकते तो आके करेंगे क्या?
But I think, look, what you said right at the beginning, I think you can actually break this poly crisis down into the economic crisis, the constitutional crisis, the civil military sort of tussle that we have right now. You've got an overarching security issue, which is your Taliban issue, which I think can be plugged into the civil military crisis because that's often used as a tool, let's be honest. And then you've got an overall lack of confidence in the population and the masses,
and you
right?
have a much bigger problem. You have a youth bulge. Your average age is 23 or something. You have millions of people coming into the job market. Those millions of people who are now coming into the voting bloc as well, they become the largest voting bloc. That's why they influence your elections. And all of these people have been educated extremely poorly. The majority of these people have very few tools of the trade available. They have not been given any alternative to a paper book education. They haven't been given some kind of vocational learning. They haven't
So
been
you're saying there's a degradation of society from an intellectual perspective.
Well, I can't comment on their intellect, but on the equipping of their intellect, definitely.
Right.
They haven't been properly equipped.
So let's take each of these one by one, right?
Okay.
Let's start with the economic and financial crisis. The foundation of this was laid where, in your opinion? Because in the 60s, we were good. If you think about it, in Ayub Khan's
The
time,
foundation was
we were
laid-
actually making
We weren't.
progress.
We weren't good.
You weren't good.
We were very bad. The foundation of this was laid in 1947 when Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, in order to attract investment into this country, told all of the people that he knew who happened to be from his community or from everyone around him or who happened to be Muslim League leaders that come and set this country up. In return, we will give you the cheapest money available in the world for the easiest 10 years available in the world and at a return that suits your convenience. So this upper middle class of India that happened to be Muslim came here and became billionaires because they got money that the Americans gave us as part of our negotiation with them.
Right.
They got that
How
money
much was that?
From
Do you know?
It was hundreds of millions at the time. Today, in today's terms, it was billions. But they got
And the
that.
Americans gave this money.
Well, we were a new country, so
Right.
we got our treasury, the amount of treasury that we got, and then the Americans.
Where did that money come from? The treasury came from India. It
was-
divided India.
Yes, it was a divided. It was our share of that money.
Right.
And then when we were setting up our capitalist society, because we decided not to go towards the Soviets and China, we decided to go towards America. The American Marshall Plan was in vogue for the whole of Europe. So,
So
we
basically,
also got,
America bought their allegiance that
No,
way.
they didn't. Well, no, they didn't. They bought our country's allegiance at the time. We decided to go their way because the Indians had already gone to the Soviets, so we felt that is no longer an option for us. But whatever we did, with the use of that, the Indians also got foreign aid. Foreign aid wasn't the issue. The issue was the use of that foreign aid. The Indians put into a very bureaucratic but socialist venture.
Structure, right.
And they used the money at the time to set up Indian technology universities. Nehru used it to set up an educational structure as well as something for India,
Which is now paying its dividends.
They have some of the best
World's
universities in the
biggest
world.
companies, CEOs are mostly
All
Indian.
coming from there?
17 or 18
When
of
I
them.
was in university, you're talking about now, when I was in university in 2004, the cream who could afford it from Pakistan went abroad. The cream who weren't smart enough would go abroad from India. It
Correct.
wasn't about affording it.
Exactly.
Because
It
the
was-
smartest ones went to India.
And that's because of the way the money was invested in 47
Yeah.
onwards.
So we took that money
And did what with it?
and we gave it to these traders who became industrialists.
And where did these traders come from?
Well, they came from Gujarat mostly. They were the 23 families that were identified
The
by
Maiman-speaking traders.
Well, not just them.
Okay,
but
the Gujarati traders.
but not just the Gujarati traders as well. The Muslim League connected traders who all came in here, and
Right.
that list of the Valikas, the
Yes, the 23
Adamjis, the
families and
Habibs,
whatever, yeah.
everyone who are around still today is sitting
Right.
on like white elephants. These people were given, interest-free loans to set up industries, which they did. So they did their job. They reaped the benefits off of it.
Right.
But then power became
Concentrated.
in them.
So you're saying, I just want to break that again. You're saying we got money, Pakistan got money, India got money at the time of partition. Treasury divide हो
We
गई.
got less than we should have, whatever.
वो छोड़ दे, ठीक है, जो मिला जैसे मिला जहाँ से मिला हमें पैसे मिल गए. इंडिया ने उन्हीं पैसों का अपनी इकोनॉमी में और अपने लोगों में इन्वेस्ट किया.
जी.
Right? They
That's
invested in
why
the
the
people.
Indian billionaires started post 1990 when they deregulated. The
Right.
Pakistani billionaires
Have been
started
around for
right then. They were just like,
So
right
the
then.
money went to the hands of a few.
Ji.
Those few set up industries.
Ji.
Those industries thrived in the 50s and 60s.
Those industrialists then created a natural compact with non-political people,
Which are?
the army
Okay.
and the military. They made a natural compact with them because
Why
they
with
only
them?
because they only had to deal with one person. They could stick to them. They could.
Why?
It was
But there was
convenient.
also there was also political instability at
Ji,
that time,
the political-
47 ke baad, because after 47 all the way to Ayub Khan, you had multiple changes in leadership with no continuity in thought,
Ji.
right?
You had multiple changes of leadership because you had a very chaotic people put together only on the premise that they believed in the same God. And it turns out that wasn't good enough to keep a polity functioning, as in that is a minimum marker that you felt, but it didn't keep everyone functioning together in the right way. And Punjab had its own issues because it had an entire class that migrated and that was
Right.
taken over by another entire class. And
Right.
you had Sindh where an entire class migrated, like the entire trading class, most of it left. And then they became unsettled all around the world. And the Sindhi Hindu
Right.
is an identifier in itself. And
Right.
they identify very strongly with that sentiment today. And they're sitting in Africa with industry. They're sitting in most of the world. They're sitting there and they have a unique identifier where
Right.
they feel like they were made to migrate.
They were displaced because of the displacement of the Indian Muslims coming into Pakistan.
Well, they were displaced because there was an entirety of displacement.
Fair enough. So now you've got this concentration of wealth.
So one second, can I come to
Yeah.
Ayub? So you said it was going well with Ayub. It was going well for the middle classes with Ayub at the expense of East Pakistan. It was East Pakistan surpluses that were being plugged into the places Ayub Khan liked. It's East Pakistan surpluses. Today's Bangladesh's surpluses that were used to make Islamabad. That money was taken from Bangladesh's surpluses. And this rhetoric was being built about how the Bengalis are poor, they don't deserve the aid. So aid was coming in. There was a famine in Bengal, and that aid was being rerouted to West Pakistan because people felt like, what will they do with
So
tissue
this
paper?
concept of do take ka aadmi
Yeah.
was from that time. Even though we're taking money from Bangladesh to
Yes.
fund West Pakistan.
Even though they were self-sufficient.
They were self-sufficient.
They were self-sufficient.
But the narrative was not that.
Well, no, because
But how? Okay, so what I don't understand is where I get confused. So if Bangladesh at that time was self-sufficient, Pakistan had these big 20, 22, whatever families there were, setting up industry. Industry means setting up jobs, setting up parallel industries, supporting economies. How come that was not creating enough financial muscle for the country on its own?
Well, it was creating enough to let them survive. It was creating enough for them to be an excuse to partner with for people like Ayub. But then along comes Bhutto and his economists, and they identify these families as being the source of the problem. And then he tries to cure it with a bigger problem, which is nationalization.
But that created an even bigger problem because the people who were at least investing in the country, and let's say maybe it would have taken another 20, 30 years for it to pay dividends, suddenly decided we will never invest a dime because whatever we invested has been taken away from us.
I don't think it was theirs, Faizan.
See, that's why you're saying it wasn't theirs to begin, because it was free money that was given to them at the time
It
of
wasn't
partition.
theirs. They were at best custodians of it. They couldn't say it was theirs. And I think if Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had better people in government, he would have succeeded at that
But
point.
nationalization is the wrong approach
It
for
must
that.
be. Today you will say it's wrong, but at that time you had
Power brokers. There were 22
concentration of power.
Correct.
And you had such a disparity. The Gini coefficient at the time, even today, it's rubbish. But it was there was such a disparity that he felt it was politically for him the right thing to do. He felt it was socially for him the right thing to do. And if you ask his most ardent supporters today, they will tell you that we still support what happened because at least today...
His supporters would say that.
No,
Obviously,
no,
they would
but
say that because
they-
it was a concentration of power and he couldn't challenge that power, so best nationalize it.
Well, they say that it allowed for unionization. It allowed for people's representation towards the bottom. It allowed for power to today be in the hands of 3,000 families instead of 30. Otherwise, it would have remained that way. It allowed for a little bit of a break.
But it also created doubt that if I invest in this country tomorrow, I don't know if the government will take it away. Ask any businessman who invests.
That's not
they
their
think-
option. That's not. If you're a good government, that's not an option. Because the other thing you can do is smuggle money abroad. And if you were a good
Which is
government...
happening at scale.
But if you were
today.
a good government in 1970, that wouldn't have been an option because you have a passport. If you've seen a passport from that time, it has the last few pages are about foreign exchange, and you were supposed to have an entry made about how many dollars you were allowed to get from the state bank, and there'd be a stamp on it, and then you take it out, and then when you come back, you'd have to account for every dollar. And we were just a better bureaucracy back then or whatever, but that's how closed economies were all around the world.
So now you've nationalized, you're saying, so I just want to take it from there. 47, you get free money, you get money from the treasury. India invests in its people. We invest in 22 families. Those families become big and rich. They realize that working with the military is the only option because that's the only place there's consistency. The reason for that is the military had, let's say, a 400-year history.
Then you get a military intervention.
That
ruins everything with regards to institutions.
And also takes advantage of the East.
That destroys the East and confidence there. That destroys the ethnic identities here other than the identity of the largest province here.
And then you get the nationalization problem. Now what happens after that between, let's say, the early 80s all the way till now, from an economic and financial view, that has brought us to this moment? Because then we had the Afghan war in the 80s.
So see,
that weaponized us, but how did it financially destroy us?
No, it didn't weaponize.
How did it financially destroy us?
We gave us an opportunity.
But it also gave us a lot of money.
It didn't give us money. It gave certain generals money who became billionaires. If at the time of the Afghan war, we had decided enough is enough, let's fix this, and we'd taken the money that was flowing, the General Akhtar Khan, Akhtar Hamid, I don't remember his name exactly, the DGI for Ziaul Haq, he would famously not be able to, his car wouldn't start in the mornings, so he'd be fiddling with the battery before the Afghan war. I think today all of his kids' net worth and their sugar mills and everything put together is a few $1 billion. I think it's from that same family that you have the Tareens. It's from that same family that you have the sugar quotas in South Punjab. It's from that same guy whose car wouldn't start. All of the money that...
Again, so he concentrated money.
No, it's not concentrated money.
Money concentrated in its distribution.
Yeah, but it wasn't meant... concentrated money for its distribution you can allege in 1947. This is theft. Because this money wasn't meant for that general. It wasn't meant for 20 generals. It wasn't meant for the entire army. It was meant for the country. And the country never saw it.
That's the entire 80s period, throughout the Afghan war.
Then
you had the 90s.
You have the Stinger missile program.
Yes.
Where they gave the Stingers and then later they wanted to buy them back. So the Stinger missiles became something that they were buying. Steve Cole writes about this. By the way, until now, everything I have said, none of it is my research. None of it is opinion I base upon some greater understanding. This has all been written on and spoken of by people who are much better than I in those areas. And if I'm wrong about something, then it's perhaps, I've got it a bit wrong, but it's not my original thought.
Right.
As isn't this one. Steve Cole says that these Stinger missiles went for $750,000 each when they were buying them back because they were desperate to get them back because now it was the CIA who wanted to bomb them. This is the 90s.
Right.
And the brokers were those boys that had supplied them. So they would give $1,000 there and sell for $750K here. So all that money, if you had even a half functioning state, at least there'd be a receipt for it, right?
And this should have gone into the coffers.
Well,
I'll tell you what, missile money.
Turkey wants to be in NATO, Turkey wants to be in EU, Turkey wants to do all of these things. But in the meanwhile, Turkey got lots of NATO funds and they built a road network. They built a rail network. I'll tell you about something I experienced and something you've experienced. When we got this latest Afghan war, the one that Musharraf ran, we got a lot of money. Coalition Support Fund gave us some $12, $13, $14 billion.
Hold that thought there. I want to get into that.
Okay.
You figured out the 80s.
Okay.
We got money in the Afghan war, should have gone to the state, did not go to the state, ended up in some hands and...
Destroyed our politics, destroyed our society, gun ran the whole of Pakistan, drugs infused the whole of Pakistan, tipped over the balance in student unions. Most importantly, whilst this was happening, the dictator decided, I don't want Vox Populi, I don't want a voice of the people. Banned unions. When you ban unions, you stop people from being able to represent themselves at the basic level. So no student union.
I would put that into the civil-military tussle, that crisis. I think that is part of the civil-military crisis.
When you ban the union, you basically decide that you need money to be a politician. Because the grassroots political leader stops being represented. So the only way you are represented is if you buy a constituency seat, if you're able to influence a constituency seat. So you decided perfectly well to ban the student union, to ban the workers' union, to ban their voices so that they can't elect their representative, that then elect the representative above them, that then feeds and informs the representative above them.
It's like saying I shut down a management trainee program to build the next CEO.
And then that CEO is in your pocket because his son is going to get to be the next CEO.
Right.
And you set the structure up and you create a political vacuum at the bottom, and then that CEO, you reward them with development funds. So you give the CEO the job of that worker on the ground, which is to identify, मेरे हल्के में 3 गटर बनने हैं, मेरे हल्के में 4 रोडें बननी है, मैं तुम्हें रोडें दूंगा, मैं तुम्हें गटर दूंगा, yay!
Because it's a lot easier to control a few CEOs than it is to
And
control.
give them money to do what's not their job. What's the job of the mayor on the ground, who should be informed by the unionist, who should be informed by the neighbor.
And
so
that-
you ruined the political system.
And that you plug in, would you put that under the civil military crisis? Would you put that under the confidence crisis you highlighted?
Well, I wouldn't put it under any one head, and it wasn't. I wouldn't.
And was it triggered because of the economic crisis?
It was triggered because of, look, the army came in, that's a trigger in itself. That's unconstitutional.
Right.
Now, they need to control different nodes of civilian expression
Right.
and societal expression, so they banned the unions. Once you banned the unions, it had the side effect of consolidating political power amongst political players who were already around at the time.
Makes sense.
And then you make those political players into mayors by saying, ये लो 50 करोड़ रुपए, या उस ज़माने में ये लो 1 करोड़ रुपए, जाके रोडें बनाओ. मैं अपने भाई से कहता हूँ, तुम एक रोड बनाने की कंपनी बनाओ और तुम 50 लाख रुपए का
टेंडर डाल दो.
टेंडर डालो, करोड़ रुपए का टेंडर डालो, 50 लाख रुपए में काम कर लेना, the rest stays in the family.
Yeah.
That's how it starts. So you have provincial and national level legislators stuck on, जी मुझे रोड चाहिए, मुझे metal रोड चाहिए, मुझे 2 गटर चाहिए, मुझे अपनी constituency में. Even today, you have people when they tell you कि हाँ PTI अच्छी है या नहीं है अच्छी, इन पख्तूनख्वा दिल से हाँ उन्होंने वो RO plant लगाया, उसने वो रोडें बनाई है, because Fazlur Rahman didn't even bother doing that. So you have Ali Amin Gandapur, who as a national level leader is obnoxious as much as he is, but you go to his constituency, you talk to people in his constituency and they'll say that बिजली अब सिर्फ 10 घंटे लोड शेडिंग होती है और आरओ प्लांट लगा हुआ है और उसने स्कूल के अंदर उस्ताद जो है वो आता है. ये कभी आज तक नहीं हुआ. So these are the jobs of a mayor. But Ali Amin is going to get elected again, which is why Fazlur Rahman is dancing in front of the Supreme Court right now, because Ali Amin will get elected again.
Coming back to this economic thing, we've covered all the way from 47 to the 80s. Take us from the 90s till today, because the 90s were a choppy period politically.
So 90s is
2000s is very logical. It's the post-Afghanistan, 9/11 thing.
90s is the revenge of the people. And it's like the wrong revenge. It's the revenge where the People's Party and the PMLN interns decide that their electorate needs to be rewarded and their companions...
Needs to be rewarded for what?
For being out of power when they should have been in power.
For the 10 years that there was martial law.
15 years that they... And they... Incompetence galore. There is no legislation.
Was money coming in from somewhere?
Well, even if it wasn't, there was enough money in the coffers to be stolen from. And then you have the great stories that make the tales.
So you had all this money that came in the 80s sitting in the coffers.
No, they weren't sitting in the coffers. That money was stolen. That money never came.
So that money didn't stick around in the 90s?
No, it didn't. We never saw it.
So the generals took it?
Yeah, most of it was skimmed off. There was no great pocket that led to...
So then when you say there was this political revenge of the people, how could they take revenge with no money in the coffers?
Because there is tax in the coffers. There was a functioning state. We weren't as poor as we are today. We had trade. We were, our subsidized textile industry, our subsidized leather industry. We were a country.
Right.
So when you are at the level of a country, if you put a lot of incompetent people in charge, which is what happened, and they decide that, it's now or never.
Right.
We don't know if we're going to be back tomorrow. You'll just get wide scale pilferage.
So then 90s was all about just take what you can and run.
Not really. That's how I would paint it in one line. But in that time, people were trying to empower themselves so that they felt like this wouldn't happen again. Nawaz Sharif in his own way, Benazir Bhutto in her own way, a lot of really good things happened. Under Benazir's watch.
What good happened?
Just the feeling that if you talk to people who grew up in the 80s and the 90s, if you talk to them, just the personal freedoms, the freedoms, that the way the government handled itself, the way that personal rights were respected, the way human rights for what they were respected.
All of these were skipped in the 80s?
Oh, completely. We were a gun-toting, heroin-addled, we were the Wild Wild West. We were suddenly from being very, very secure to being these, the flag bearers of the worst that can be represented in terms of society.
So you're saying that in a sense, having the first woman prime minister in the, let's say, late 80s, early 90s, whatever, and having civilians as elected representatives, some sort of a democratic setup, gave hope to a population that had suffered for 10 years under military rule and because of the Afghan war?
I don't know if it gave hope. It did give hope. That's why they voted her in the millions.
Even with the negative narrative that was being built, oh, they're looted and they plundered.
The narrative was built towards the end of their 3 years.
97, 98.
Yeah. No, in the 92 as well.
Right, in the 92 government.
That's when the narrative was built, and it was built by Nawaz Sharif, who was the great establishment hope at the time. And then they came in and, look, we were weak on governance. There was a lot that was wrong. But because a political party has more nodes of power than what came before it, it was still better. And then when Nawaz Sharif came in with his representatives, he also came in with a political party. There were several fonts of power. The whole idea about representative politics is that there are several nodes of power.
And you bring it up from the bottom.
So if you had student unions, if you had local government, which is the greatest problem today, which I'd like to come back to when we come to today, which is the one thing Musharraf probably got right for the wrong reasons. But if you have multi-nodal power, you cannot do the kind of things that happen in this country.
But then that's why you don't have multi-nodal power, so that you can do the kind of things that you want to do.
You have like Rana Sanaullah with representative value of 0,
right?
In his own right, at least, being able to come and be like, I cannot get over the audacity of being able to laugh off an internet closure, thinking this is the right thing. I got the Imran Khan people to shut up, without realizing that there's people who toil away
$1 billion
hand to mouth. Those billion rupees go to tens of millions of people, not to my pocket or yours. And to destroy they have no confidence.
Well, they do go to my pocket because I run a digital agency, and our campaigns all shut down because of that.
Well, maybe you could be the excuse Rana Sanaullah uses next time.
So you've got the 90s.
Yeah.
You've got the 90s. I understand the 90s was a revenge period, and then they were cut off because they realized that the mayhem that can happen, there was a little bit of looting and plundering, whatever that happened, because unko pata nahi tha ki dobara power milegi ya nahi. Ab aa jate
Desperate times the.
Desperate times the. Ab aa jaye, let's say 99 के coup पे. 99 का coup और फिर उसके बाद 9/11. ये दो बड़े.
99 के coup से पहले न्यूक्लियर टेस्ट पे आ जाते हैं.
न्यूक्लियर टेस्ट में तो सारे हमारे रिजर्व्स और फॉरेक्स बंद कर दिया गया था. $500 मिलियन मुझे आज तक याद है.
आप सोचें, एक तो इसाक डार सुभान अल्लाह, उन्होंने फैसला किया कि सबकी फॉरेन एक्सचेंज अकाउंट्स ही बंद कर दो. इनको ये भी जिस तरह आज भी
अब एग्जैक्टली अब आप सोचें, 2 इवेंट्स हैं मैं जो मेरी लाइफ में मुझे पता है. नेशनलाइजेशन की वजह से I would think twice about investing industry in this country. ठीक है, unless I'm getting major subsidies like the textile boys do in this country. That's why textile invest. उनको तो free पैसे मिलते हैं. The second thing is the foreign exchange account. Why would I keep dollars in the bank in this country?
Because you have no other option. If we were a functioning system,
we have other options. Of course we do. People are sitting on dollars in their mattresses, in their homes, in cartons.
That's illegal. And if you had proper...
But that's the set up today.
But if you had proper rule of law, this wouldn't be a bad policy. Look, I want to come to something else. India bomb फाड़ देता है. सही है? They test their nuclear bomb. Clinton calls you and says, don't test your nuclear bomb. Don't do it. We know you have it. Don't blow it up. We'll give you money. You are in a huge pile of debt. You have no money to feed your stunted, uneducated children. There are millions of children, as there are today, who don't get the nutrition they need. There are millions of children who don't get the education they need. You are a poverty-stricken country. The world's strongest people are calling you saying, हमें पता है तुम बॉम्ब फाड़ सकते हो, हमें पता है तुम कर सकते हो, हम मान लेंगे कि तुम्हारे पास बॉम्ब है, हम तुम्हें $5 अरब देंगे, तुम्हारी सारी गलतियां माफ़ कर देंगे, तुम्हें अमीर कर देंगे.
मतलब you're getting a clean slate and $5 billion.
And you're getting to keep your bomb. They're not saying अपना बॉम्ब हमें दे दो. They're saying फाड़ो नहीं. And Benazir Bhutto goes to a jalsa. अच्छा, and Benazir Bhutto commits to the back channel at the time कि ठीक है, मैं प्रेशर नहीं करूँगी नवाज शरीफ को to blow it up. नवाज शरीफ commits to the back channel at a time, ठीक है हम इसके बारे में सोचते हैं, मैं इसके बारे में जिंगोइज्म रोक दूंगा. Then Benazir Bhutto goes to a rally and says, नवाज शरीफ तुमने चूड़ियाँ पहनी हुई है, in saying that why aren't you blowing up the bomb? A woman, ex-prime minister, says you are being effeminate and weak for not blowing up the bomb. Nawaz, and I'm not saying that was the trigger moment, but I'm saying that was the level of rhetoric at the time. Then Nawaz Sharif decides कि हम घास खाएंगे लेकिन हम बॉम्ब फाड़ेंगे. घास खाई नवाज शरीफ ने?
नहीं, एक सेकंड. इसमें you don't think military का कोई रोल नहीं था?
बहुत रोल था.
मतलब मिलिट्री को पोस्चरिंग नहीं करनी थी.
Of course करनी थी.
So then I think they were all in the wrong.
But Yeah, of course they were. I'm not saying the military was in the right.
So it's not just a Nawaz Sharif problem.
No, it isn't. I'm trying to say the people that were responsible to the people at the time could have at least done what they did later, right? In 2020, where, I don't want to do this. They could have at least
So
not
you're
been
saying we
jingles
gave
about
up
it.
$5 billion
Forget the number.
at the time.
We gave up the ability to be a middle income country. Like Mifta says, 1992 में वियतनाम की वही एक्सपोर्ट्स थी जो हमारी हैं. आज हमसे 10 दफ़ा ज़्यादा है. मतलब उनकी उस वक्त 12 या 16 या 17 बिलियन थी, हमारी भी उतनी थी. आज हमारी 30 बिलियन है, उनकी 300 बिलियन है. मतलब these were the decisions taken in the 90s. हमारी एग्रीकल्चर पॉलिसी meant that कॉटन का क्रॉप जो है वो खस्ता हो गया, ख़राब हो गया, वो अलील हो गया. तो हमारा कॉटन सीड जो है वो अब तरीके की कॉटन नहीं बना सकता. टावल्स बनती हैं सिर्फ पाकिस्तानी कॉटन से, वरना इंडियन कॉटन इंपोर्ट करके उसमें मिलानी पड़ती है, या चाइनीज़ कॉटन. हायर यार्न, हमें आवर कॉटन इज रबिश विदाउट सपोर्ट.
So ये वो 90s में, so I want to come back, 90s में बॉम्ब फाड़ दिया because of a few egos?
No, I don't.
Or posturing?
No, because the military wanted it.
Because the military wanted it.
Or because Nawaz Sharif wanted to be the guy that pulled the trigger. Or because Benazir Bhutto wanted it.
And then,
I don't care. I'm just मैं ये कह ही नहीं रहा. देखिए, I'd like
So
to
it doesn't
rewind.
matter, forget it.
I'd like to rewind and say it wasn't Nawaz's fault. It wasn't Benazir's fault. It was probably all the generals' fault. But I'm just saying something. ये किस किस्म की representative हुकूमत है, किस किस्म की रिप्रेजेंटेशन है, और किस किस्म की गरीब का ख्याल है जो कहता है कि हम घास खा लेंगे. वो बच्चा जो घास खा रहा है वो मर रहा है घास खाने की वजह से. उस बच्चे को पोलियो ड्रॉप्स नहीं मिल रहे, उस बच्चे को एंटीबायोटिक्स नहीं मिल रही, उस बच्चे को जो डिजीजेस लग रहे हैं वो दुनिया में और कहीं नहीं लगते, उस बच्चे के पास खाने को नहीं है, वो स्टंटेड है. लेकिन हमने कहा कि हम घास खाएंगे. नवाज शरीफ को घास खाते हुए देखा आपने?
मैंने तो सैलेड शायद खाते होंगे.
मतलब ये दिस इज इन माय व्यू इट इज ऑब्नॉक्शियस.
बेंटली में जाते हुए सैलेड मिलता होगा ना, बॉक्स सैलेड.
40-50 करोड़ रुपए की वो गाड़ी. आई डोंट नो.
या वो ड्यूटीज के साथ, ड्यूटीज के बगैर
10 करोड़ की.
हाँ, मतलब रीजनेबल बात.
10 करोड़ की गाड़ी को घास पे चलाते हैं
वो.
आप ये बात कर कैसे सकते हैं?
आई डोंट थिंक इट्स बायोफ्यूल.
अगर कोई तमीज का थिंकिंग इलेक्टोरेट होती तो दैट वुड हैव बीन द एंड ऑफ योर पॉलिटिक्स. But it wasn't.
So okay. So it wasn't the end of politics. Now you.
अच्छा, बॉम्ब फट गया, सुपर गरीब हो गए. फिर आते हैं मुशर्रफ साहब, ये इस पहाड़ पे मैं अपना झंडा लहराऊंगा, और वहाँ पे वो नवाज शरीफ से कहते हैं नहीं कुछ नहीं हो रहा, और हम लोग जंग कर रहे हैं वहाँ पे ना स्नीकीली. अच्छा, बंदे मर रहे हैं, उनको एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर रहे कि हमारे कारगिल बंदे मर रहे हैं, हम कह रहे हैं हमारे है ही नहीं. Can you imagine sending soldiers into the line of fire in the highest peaks the world has ever seen, the stupidest place to fight, going and fighting and not accepting their heroism when they're dead? And we did this for a long time, and then when shit hit the fan, we're like, Nawaz Sharif, yaar tum jaake maafi maang lo. And then Nawaz Sharif is going like, okay, I'm sorry, लड़ाई हो गई, वो मुझे पता नहीं था. अच्छा, and then the guy pulls a coup. मतलब नवाज शरीफ डिसाइड्स के यार ये वापस आ रहे हैं अभी हवा में, ये आधा जनरल होगा हवा में अगर है, तो मैं इसको अभी निकालने की कोशिश करता हूँ. तो एंड देन मुशर्रफ बॉयज डिसाइड के नहीं भाई, ये मतलब आर्मी चीफ है यार, एक ऑलरेडी तुम निकाल चुके. अच्छा, जहांगीर करामत बेचारे को निकाल दिया, सॉलिड आर्मी चीफ था इसलिए निकाल दिया, इसलिए उसने कहा कि यार नेशनल सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल होना चाहिए, जिसके अंदर आज सब लोगों को बिठा के उनकी तरफ से एलामिया लेने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, जो बन गया नेशनल सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल. उसके सजेशन पे जहांगीर करामत को निकाल दिया. तो अब ये जो मुश आए, अच्छा क्यों आए? क्योंकि यार ये ही इज़ नॉन पंजाबी, ही इज़ अ बिट ऑफ अ पार्टी बॉय, तो इसको हम कंट्रोल कर लेंगे. तो उसको लगाया उसको इस वजह से. That guy went, yeah, I want Kashmir, right? I want to fix this shit.
So this basically he became the Zia for Bhutto, in a sense. I mean, think about it. Zia put Bhutto for very similar reasons also.
No, Zia and Bhutto, look, Zia felt that if I don't do this, I'll die.
No, but Zia felt that Bhutto felt that Zia would be his subservient.
Yes.
And similarly,
all of the problems ever caused in Pakistan have been caused because people pick people thinking they're weak and they'll be my subservient. That's how every judge, every general.
So pick strong people because they don't have insecurities.
Or don't mess with the picking of people when it's not your job.
So now Musharraf aata hai, but with the Musharraf thing, it's a little tricky, right? In my view, he comes in pre 9/11, but then the 9/11 is what created all of the funding surplus.
Hang on. He comes in pre 9/11. There's a shit show of an economy. Nothing is working. And he comes on TV again and again and says, I'm not here because I wanted to be here. I'm just here because they tried to kill me in a plane. Because he has no idea what he's got to do. They can't do anything. They are completely at sea. They're trying to negotiate with the mullahs.
October 99. Yeah.
No, it's
it's
okay.
October.
October 99.
9.
They're trying to negotiate with the mullahs. They're trying to get everyone, whoever can get on board. They're
And
trying
this
to
is
get
2
on board.
years before 9/11. So for 2 years, we were running kind of,
We don't know what the hell we're doing. And then 9/11 happens.
and then we get a plan.
No, we don't just get a plan.
We get a lot of money.
We got a call saying you're either with us or against us.
Yeah.
And Bush is like, I'm you. Forget with you or against you, I'm you. And then he writes in his memoirs that I used to sell Pakistanis to them for X and Y. And, he doesn't see anything wrong with this. So not only are we them,
So
they're
his
like,
first 2 years, he had no plan. Suddenly he gets a call saying you are either with us or against us, which makes us part of that plan.
so all the debt goes away and we get coalition support funds.
So 2001 to 2007, we get money.
No, 1 second. What do we do with that money?
And I was just getting to that.
Okay. So you get coalition support funds, which are literally...
And you get, by the way, war reimbursement, which was separate.
Why do you get that? You get coalition support funds for the degradation of infrastructure that occurs because you are supporting the coalition.
So you should
That
invest
money is literally for your infrastructure.
Right.
What does Musharraf do? He armor-clads the NLC and he gives them the contract for moving all of the NATO stuff. So what could have given us a first-rate cargo network of trains all over the country instead gave us dilapidated roads and a very rich NLC and a very rich posting to the NLC. And that's the net effect of how this
So
country
you're saying
is
the
run.
coalition support funds is the NLC today.
Well, not just the NLC.
But the supportive.
But this kind of understanding where the
Right.
army decided that they would put their fingers into this new pie.
Right.
And so the army expanded. It expanded the corporate structure of the army and it took over so many of these things that the
Right.
people didn't see. So this PS1 for which Sheikh Rashid, of all the competent people in the world, was tasked with running for the new CPAC train line.
Yeah,
We wouldn't
yeah.
have needed it. It would have already been there. It would have been there.
So we
because
had the money to rebuild the logistics
we
infrastructure.
got money
the roads,
for that infrastructure.
and it was actually
You didn't even have to think about it कि नहीं मैं इस पैसों की ट्रेन लगाता हूँ. नहीं, वो पैसे मिले ट्रेन लगाने के लिए थे. वो आपने फैसला किया कि नहीं इसका टेंडर भी नहीं होगा क्योंकि ये एक सिक्योरिटी की चीज़ है, ये नेशनल सिक्योरिटी इंपेरेटिव है और इसके लिए नेशनल एनएलसी ट्रक्स बनाएंगी. फिर एनएलसी ने सोचा कि हम बिल्डिंगें भी बनाएंगे, हम ब्रिज भी बनाएंगे. फिर गुलजार अहमद साहब को ख्याल आया कि ये एनएलसी से पूछेंगे ये खड्डे खोद सकते हैं, ये एफडब्ल्यूओ वाले ब्रिज बना सकते हैं. एंड now you have basically a
So
situation
NLC is a real estate development company today.
I don't know what
and
it
a
is.
logistics.
By the Frontier Works organization, which got a lot of the contracts for, is currently like these non competitive entities are currently abusing loopholes in public procurement laws and bidding for things where they are then exempt from having to compete with anyone else. Once they win the bid, they then break it up into separate things and sell it on to private contractors. So your entire public procurement system is now hostage to
Right.
this system of kleptocracy. Your entire system of government in your peripheries is hostage to this system of kleptocracy. It is part of the poly crisis, and if you keep going into it, it'll become darker and darker, and it'll start identifying individuals, which I don't want to do because I want to live here without.
So
I don't want to flip burgers in England.
You've taken us to 07, let's say 08. Now you've got the political electorate, you've got the democracy come back in. 08 till now, where have we gone wrong?
08 to 13, you had the People's Party. So, that has to have a star next to it.
Really? Why?
It's the People's Party.
They did a lot of great legislative work during this time.
That's
I mean,
when
let's
you
give
start
them credit
when you
where
start
credit
trying
is
to
due.
write about the good of the People's Party, you say that, and then you have to kind of hope someone interrupts you because that's it. They did some great legislative work. They have some great legislators. They have some great human rights speakers. They have some, but you have to kind of then stop. So you had the People's Party, and it had a very averse international environment. You had a global recession. So, and the dollar went to where it did. The oil went to where it did, and
08 to 11 was a tough period. You had the Great Recession. Dubai took a hit at that time, major hit. A lot of people had invested in Dubai, so a lot of people took a hit in Pakistan.
So,
but then 11 to let's say now, you've had the Nawaz government, you've had the PTI government, you've had the Corona crisis where there was money being thrown left, right, and center. I mean, you had an amnesty in 14, I want to say.
You had some kind of amnesty from 2013 till 2021, 22.
Some exactly. So, but we didn't get money from outside as often. We got some support.
The reason why we've lasted this long, is because we have a nuisance value. We are the thugs or we are the
Guns for hire. We're the black water of the countries.
And there's fortunately been a problem nearby that we can be used to resolve. That's no longer.
So we're basically security guards for hire.
That's no longer the case.
So there's no problem nearby.
And the world.
So why don't we create a problem?
Well, I don't know, but we are currently.
Because we clearly seem to get money every time there's a problem.
We are currently.
So let's create a problem.
But the world is no longer interested
in problems.
In fixing our neighborhood. So we can't be the cheapest available
So
fixes.
we haven't, for that reason, received that kind of support that you got from the coalition support, from the Afghan war.
Not just that, Faizan. We
in the
are
last 10,
no
15
longer part of the conversation. We are no longer part of... Afghanistan is talked about as a problem the Americans inherited because it's kind of their fault. India is talked about as a regional power. They're talked about as a trading power.
Iran has made relations with Saudi.
Yeah, that's another problem that's solved without us. And we're trying to claim... Imran Khan is tweeting about, हाँ, ये मैंने किया था. वो मैंने दोस्ती कराई थी. Well, just sit down.
So Iran has solved Afghan someone else's problem. India is a power. ऊपर आपके पास China का एक छोटा सा टुकड़ा है, and then you've got some Central Asian
the
states.
The Chinese also look at you as more of a problem than a solution.
But अच्छा एक second, coming to the Chinese, I think 08 से लेके 23 तक, the money you did get was CPAC.
Look, CPAC as well. Now,
infrastructure.
This is not my opinion.
And by the way, they built some great roads.
Yeah, Faizan, the majority of that money was for power because we wanted to solve the power crisis.
Where did that money go?
It went into conventional power plants that led to the current account balance crisis.
The conventional power plants that were set up by the elite?
No, the conventional power plants that were set up in 2013, 14, 15
right.
to try and address the crisis, which
right.
were then corrected to an extent by Shahid Khaqan Abbasi.
But this was also that period where the elite set up their own power projects independent and got 17% returns dollarized.
That's from 92 to now. But that's a separate problem. Sugar, power, all of these cartelization of these industries is a separate problem. But what I'm trying to get at is the CPAC as a project didn't make sense to any intelligent economist at the time. Not to me, I didn't know. But everyone was saying these are fine if you're getting investment, but this is unsustainable investment because the investment requires a permanent dent upon your ability to pay for it. Because
right.
you're going to have to borrow to pay for these, what you're getting. Like for example, what you could have done with CPAC would be to set up solar farms so that at least, or to set up vertical integration of the solar industry so that at least you weren't fine if you need to import batteries, those are complex to make.
Cost.
At least you can make solar cells yourself, which we can't even make ourselves. At least you could have created a vertical integration of...
That would have created power, generating cash flow to pay back the debt.
And at least would not require you to import oil.
Right.
But even when you got this windfall, where the Chinese were just thinking about this, this region of theirs that they don't really care about, that they want to de-Muslimize, that they want to figure out on their own, and they just want it to have like warm water access, so they wanted a port out of you. And for this, they were willing to lay on whatever amount of money they were willing to lay upon you, and you couldn't structure it properly because you just weren't thinking beyond the money. You could not structure that, even now, even after having supposedly learned your lessons from the two Afghan wars, even then you could not structure that lesson for yourself, where at least now we could have used some of those $20-30 billion to figure out what is good for the people. Instead, we figured out, road banti hai to kaun banata hai? To road bana do.
So you've got the CPAC. CPAC was not used, or CPAC was not sustainable. And so actually you've kind of answered all the buckets through incorrect allocation of funds over the last 75 years.
Improper priorities,
concentration in the few hands. Because you see, if I think about it now, when you talk about the fact that we had money up until recently, we were given money, we were given a lot of opportunities. We, because of a civil military disbalance or whatever it was, that money allocation was not in the right hands, further worsening that civil military alliance.
Yeah.
Then we have a security problem that we did not solve properly. In fact, we leveraged that problem for our political gain within the states as well.
Or economic gain.
Then, because we took poor decisions along the way that did not serve the awam, ki aap ghas khaye, we lost the confidence of the people. And at the same time, when you shut down your unions, whether it was student unions, labor unions, you shut down the ability to create grassroots level leaders, a pipeline of leadership, which means that there's become a competence problem.
And also, Musharraf, the one good thing he did was local government, because he wanted to dilute the power of the people in the MNA and MPA level. But then those people, instead of investing in local government, they shut it down because right now their political parties are not strong enough
To be able to sustain
internally,
that.
to be able to sustain multinodal power at the bottom. So they're shutting it down. There's a Supreme Court, there's a constitutional requirement to have proper competent local government. There's a Supreme Court decision that requires you to have proper competent local government. But any party in power, including the PTI, when in power, will never want a local government election because effective local government will denude them of power, they feel, because their power is not multinodal enough to survive 3 layers of government.
Interesting. But the one thing you've not touched on is the constitutional crisis, right? I see that missing. I mean, unless you turn around and say, you know what? Well, we actually changed the constitution a whole bunch of times to serve these elite, to serve the military, to serve everyone so that the money remains concentrated, power remains concentrated.
Today's constitution, after the 18th Amendment, there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually...
Today, right now.
Our constitution...
So then why is there a constitutional crisis?
Because people are not adhering to the constitution.
So just follow it. That's it.
Yeah, the government isn't following the constitution. It is right now, as we speak, it is protesting in front of the Supreme Court because they don't want to fulfill a constitutional imperative.
Which is?
Hold elections.
So the constitutional crisis, I think, is the only one that does not connect to the economic financial, but you're saying we are creating our own constitutional crisis.
Not because the constitution is weak, but because it's not being followed.
And so you think the constitution as it stands is fine?
Yes, I think it's perfect.
And so why is it not being followed? Because the concentration of power in the hands of a few, because the money is going to remain in the coffers and then be able to be...
Because of overreach by judges.
So then how and who, flip it, who and how can actually drive some change at this point? If it's not the elite and if it's not the military and it's not government, can the people actually do something, or they just screwed in the process?
It's called elections.
But who will they elect?
Well, they'll elect an idiot as far as they're concerned, but they'll elect their idiot. And that's what needs to happen.
But then wouldn't that idiot take us down a path that...
Whatever he does, it's representative government. You got to let people learn their lessons. You can't make their decisions for them.
There's no other choice.
Why would there be? Why should there be?
There's no choice of a new representative. Why are we stuck?
There is.
Why are we stuck with dynastic politics?
It won't be.
And then this one dude who's been around for 20 plus years.
Stop fiddling with the system.
Where is the succession pipeline of leadership?
It'll come. Just stop fiddling with the system. Today, the level of answerability in Punjab, rural and urban, is tenfold more than it was 20 years ago. The level of public awareness is tenfold more. The level of information dissemination is tenfold more. This will yield to something. This will create something. You don't have to fiddle with it. Just don't fiddle with it. The Pakhtunkhwa is voting probably for Imran Khan for the 3rd time for a reason. It has to do with service delivery. It has to do with identification. It has to do with representation. Just let them do it. Let people elect who they want. Give them representative local government. Let them get tired of who they thought they wanted. Let them do it again. Let them do it again. And eventually the world has taught us that if you let people do this again and again to the point where you make elections boring, you get things. You get results. You get things work.
Yeah, but that dilutes the power. That dilutes You've talked about elite capture. You've talked about how power has been concentrated over the last 75 years.
Yeah.
You've talked about how some people have made a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, they're still trying to hang on. And you're seeing what's happening. So
let go. The solution is let go.
Hang on as hard as you can, but it is going to be taken from you. And what we're seeing right now is the process of it being taken from you. And
that's why the Supreme Court supports Imran Khan at this point.
The Supreme Court does not support Imran Khan. A few individuals
they were very happy to see him.
A few individuals within the Supreme Court may support Imran Khan. But by and large, the steps taken by the Supreme Court from April 2022 onwards have been for what they perceive to
support
be
the Constitution,
the greater good.
Which is support of the Constitution.
Yes.
Interesting. This is a great discussion. I mean, I think you've broken it down well. I think, the source of all the problem was the misallocation of money, the concentration of a few. I didn't even touch on how some of these lobbies benefit, like the Aptamas or the sugar industry. Because if you think about it, I mean, they have actually benefited and built businesses that are not proper functioning, cash flow operating great businesses, but are subsidized businesses by the state. Right? Cheap energy constantly.
It's because of these businesses that you have restaurants in the city that sell 35,000 rupee steaks. It's people like those who buy them. It's because of these businesses that you have people who fly their maids out on private planes because they want to go, this Arab sheikhdom in Pakistan. If you didn't have these class layerings, you wouldn't have people like this in Pakistan.
These are subsidized businesses. We pay for them.
Yes.
We give them 1%
$17 billion
loans. We give them 1% loans
every year.
Just so that they can churn out $21 billion of exports.
Just so they can rent private planes to fly around the world with Filipino mates. That's what we do. That's our country.
Stop giving them cheap energy.
Well, stop giving them the people's money.
And stop giving them the people's money.
Just stop giving them the people's money. The people
Right.
don't have enough money, and stop deciding that the people will eat grass when you're not the one eating grass.
So, and to take it to the last point, now there's an entire, you said the youth average age is 23. Let's say there's the youth middle class 18 to 30 at this point in time. Obviously, we don't want people to ride. Yaar, it creates such a bad impression. जाके आपने एक German car dealership जला दी. अगर कभी भी Volkswagen Group कहता पाकिस्तान में एक economy या market है और जाके plant लगा दो, छोटी गाड़ियाँ बेचेंगे, they're never going to do that.
ये जर्मन ग्रुप को यहाँ होना ही नहीं चाहिए था.
क्यों? बहुत महंगी गाड़ियाँ बेच रहे हैं.
हाँ, आवाम के लिए तो कोई
चले उन्होंने आवाम ने जला
यार
दी.
अगर आपकी
लेकिन
प्रॉपर इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी होती ना तो ऑडी यहाँ पे गाड़ियाँ नहीं बेच रही होती. 10 साल बाद आती या 10 साल पहले आ चुकी होती अगर आपने अपने काम ठीक किए होते. लेकिन इनका यहाँ होना भी एक सिम्टम है. ये एक एग्जाम्पल है कि क्या गलत है इस मुल्क में कि सस्ती रोटी की लाइनें भी लगी हुई हैं उसी शहर में ऑडी की डीलरशिप भी है. ये देखें, आई माइट बी बीइंग वेरी आइडियलिस्टिक हियर, बट देयर इज़ अ प्रॉब्लम विद द वे योर इकोनॉमी इज स्ट्रक्चर्ड विच अलाउज फॉर द ई-ट्रॉन टू बी ड्यूटी फ्री इम्पोर्टेड फॉर अ सर्टेन विंडो वाइल्स्ट
a 1000cc car cannot be duty.
an 800cc car can't be properly imported.
And this is my last question. So then how do the youth rise and try to change this? Is it just elections that they should do at this point?
They're already rising by expressing their dismay, by the satire you see on TikTok, by the commentary you see on Twitter, by the narratives they build amongst themselves, by the way they talk about things, by their despondency and how it finds vent. They're already, it's not an option to them. It is something that is central to them by their desire to get out of here. And if you give them a right to vote.
But what if they all leave?
Well, they can't
Before they
all
vote.
leave. They can't all leave. All of them want to leave, and you can't blame them for wanting to leave. But all of them won't be able to leave.
True.
So the ones that are left behind, they will. If you don't give them an expression, you will get a disaster. But if you give them an expression, you have to respect it. And most of them, I know which way they'll vote. And you got to let them learn their lessons.
And that's fine because we learn through a process of evolution.
Yes, we have to. There's no other choice.
Moiz, thank you so much for the time. I love the way you broke it out. I think it was much clearer to think through the challenges that we have. And at the end of the day, I think the feedback is right. Take the decision. We'll learn from the decision. We'll make mistakes and we'll keep getting better. 75 years is nothing in the life of a country. It's just the starting period.
Yeah.
It's like being 7 years old.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Faizan. It was a pleasure to be here. It was a wonderful
Cheers.
discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning to Digitales. Subscribe to the channel below and stay tuned to the next episode. Bye-bye.